We live in an age of modern titans. Musk, Bezos, Arno. Their wealth is so vast it becomes abstract. But could any of them compare to the wealth of history's greatest empires? Let's dive into it. Of course, the richest person ever is a fantastic subject for economic analysis, as it forces us to compare wealth across vastly different economic systems and epochs. It's less about a single answer and more about how we define and measure wealth itself. Let me introduce myself. I'm an economist. I make videos that matter. And this is global economics, where we ask the big questions. The core problem is the index problem. How do you compare the wealth of a 14th century African emperor to a 19th century American oil baron? You can't just adjust for inflation. You have to consider their power relative to their entire economy. So economists often use a different metric: share of contemporary gross domestic product. How much of the entire world's or their nation's economic output could this one person control? So let's meet the contenders. First, the modern champions. Jeff Bezos. At his peak, his net worth was around $200 billion, roughly 0.2% of global GDP, a massive concentration of wealth, but a tiny fraction of the whole. Now go back to the Gilded Age. John D. Rockefeller, the king of oil. At his zenith in the early 1900s, his personal wealth was estimated at nearly 2% of the entire U.S. GDP. That's an astonishing level of control over a national economy. But to find the true heavyweights, we must look to rulers who are the state. The name that most often tops these lists is Mansa Musa, the emperor of the Mali Empire in the early 1300s. His wealth was legendary. Built on salt and gold, the most coveted resources of his era, his famous pilgrimage to Mecca involved distributing so much gold in Cairo that he allegedly depressed the price of gold in the region for a decade. Modern economists, attempting to calculate his wealth, struggle to put a number on it. Estimates range from a conservative $400 billion to an almost incomprehensible $4 trillion in today's money. But more importantly, some estimates suggest he controlled a significant portion of the world's gold supply at the time. But can we even call Mansa Musa a person in the modern sense? This brings us to perhaps the most compelling argument: Augustus Caesar. For over 40 years, he was the sole ruler of the Roman Empire. At its peak, accounted for an estimated 25 to 30% of the entire world's GDP. As the historian Ian Morris calculated, at one point, Augustus personally controlled a treasury equivalent to 1/5 of the entire empire's economy. He wasn't just rich, he was the economy. He could raise armies, build cities, and feed millions on a whim. This isn't personal wealth, something beyond sovereign wealth with no separation between the ruler and the state treasury. So who wins? The answer depends entirely on your definition. If you measure by pure modern currency conversion, Mansa Musa's gold might give him the edge. If you measure by control over a national economy, Rockefeller is a strong contender. But if you measure by sheer unrestrained command over a vast share of global production, the answer might just be Augustus Caesar. Now, if you made it this far, you're probably wondering, okay, great. Tell me the definitive answer. And unfortunately, I can't do that because there's not one. There's actually a few. And to illustrate that point, let's bring in a third contender. You see, if we're talking about absolute control over a huge swath of the economy, then let's talk about someone who was arguably the first capitalist in history, the Sultan of Brunei, the Sharif family. Brunei is a small country sandwiched between Malaysia and Indonesia, but during the 15th century, its sultanate controlled 2/3 of the global trade in spices, which at the time were basically the only way to keep food edible. Spices were luxury goods, yes, but they were also a matter of public health. They were considered essential to preserving meat during long sea voyages. And without them, the world couldn't risk scurvy running rampant among sailors. This meant that the Sultan of Brunei had control over every sailor in the entire world. And thanks to their monopoly, they used this control to extract tribute from both sides of the spice trade, the Portuguese and the Chinese. We don't know exactly what kind of wealth the Sharif family accumulated, but we do know that they taxed each ship sailing through their waters, bringing in an estimated 60 tons of gold annually. At the height of their power in the 15th century, this would equate to around $700 million. And while that sounds impressive, that was literally peanuts compared to the riches of Mansa Musa or Augustus Caesar. So then what's the answer here? Well, the reality is that depending on what metric you choose, any of these three could be the winner. Mansa Musa has the highest adjusted net worth, but that's based on a very rough estimate. Augustus Caesar has the best claim to total control over his contemporary economy, but we're making some assumptions about how he kept track of his wealth. And the Sharif family has the strongest claim to controlling a global resource, and thus the world economy. But we're again relying on estimations. And that's why I say it is. Less about a single definitive answer and more about the journey of exploring what wealth means throughout history. Take Augustus Caesar. Sure, he was responsible for building roads, aqueducts, temples, and colosseums, all wonders of engineering and design. But let's remember that he also orchestrated brutal campaigns of conquest to expand his empire. His reign saw countless battles that ended lives and destabilized regions. If we were to add up the cost of all the military campaigns, infrastructure projects, and public works programs under his rule, it might give us a rough gauge of his wealth. But it wouldn't tell us anything about the human cost, the displacement, the deaths, the upheaval. Or take Mansa Musa. He left a legacy of incredible mosques, universities, libraries, and hospitals. But his empire rested on the backs of a brutal slave force that participated in horrific acts of violence. The wealth of conquerors is always built on destruction, exploitation, and dispossession. So maybe the real question shouldn't be who was the richest person ever, but rather, what does it mean to be rich? Is it about building great structures, institutions, and cultural centers? Or is it about having enough wealth to meet everyone's basic needs? Perhaps the real answer lies somewhere in between those extremes. After all, this question isn't just about numbers or charts. It reflects our fascination with power, control, and the meaning of wealth. It reminds us that economics isn't just about transactions and markets. It's about understanding the very fabric of society. From the opulent palaces of ancient emperors to the bustling bazaars of medieval marketplaces, the quest for wealth has been a constant thread in human history. But perhaps the greatest lesson from our journey through time is that true wealth isn't just measured in gold or glory. It's measured in the well-being and prosperity of a society as a whole. As we reflect on the titans of industry and rulers of empires, let's remember that their wealth, however staggering, was often intertwined with the struggles and sacrifices of countless others. The story of wealth is ultimately the story of humanity itself. And now I want to hear from you. Who do you think deserves the title of the richest person ever, and why? Share your thoughts in the comments section. And for more thought-provoking economic insights, subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell for new releases. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. If you enjoyed it and learned something new, join the discussion on social media using the hashtag provided. This is Global Economics. I'm the host. Keep thinking.